The crack of a gunshot echoed through the dusty main street of Promise Creek, Colorado, as Daisy Winters ducked behind an overturned water trough, her heart pounding against her ribs. It was 1871, and she'd been a widow for precisely 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days not that she was counting. The gunshot hadn't been aimed at her. It was merely another Friday afternoon brawl outside the saloon, but it served as a stark reminder of how precarious her position had become in this unforgiving frontier town. "Mrs. Winters, you best get inside." Sheriff Thornton called out, his weathered face creased with concern. "These drunks are rowdier than usual today." Daisy gathered her skirts and hurried toward her small millinery shop. At 26, she was far too young to be consigned to a life of loneliness, yet the whispers that followed her down the street suggested otherwise. Her husband Harold had been the town's only clockmaker, a trade she knew nothing about. When consumption took him, it took her livelihood as well. "There goes useless Winters," came a stage whisper from Mrs. Peterson outside the general store. "Can't fix a clock, can't keep a house proper, can't even give poor Harold a child before he passed. What good is she to anyone now?" Daisy kept her chin high as she unlocked her shop door. The millinery was failing. Women didn't need fancy hats in Promise Creek. They needed practical sun bonnets and winter caps, which the general store supplied at half her prices. But it was all she had left. The bell above her door jingled as she entered, dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through her display window. Daisy removed her shawl and hung it on the hook beside the door, surveying the empty shop with a heavy heart. Not a single customer all day. She moved to her workbench and picked up the half-finished hat she'd been laboring over, a commission from the mayor's wife that would barely cover her flour for the month. The fine needlework had once brought her joy, but now it only reminded her of her precarious circumstances. The banknote was due in 3 weeks. After that, she'd lose the shop and the small room upstairs where she lived. The thought brought tears to her eyes, but Daisy blinked them away. Crying wouldn't pay the bills. The sound of horses' hooves and a wagon pulling up outside her shop drew her attention. Curious, she moved to the window and peered out. A dusty wagon loaded with wooden crates had stopped in front of her store. The driver, a broad-shouldered man she'd never seen before, jumped down from the seat and stretched his long legs. He wore practical clothes, denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the harsh Colorado sun. Not a typical customer for ladies' hats. The bell above her door jingled as he entered, bringing the scent of leather, horse, and the open plains with him. "Afternoon, madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair and the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen. A thin scar ran along his jawline, giving his otherwise handsome face a rugged quality. "Porter Irwin," he introduced himself with a slight bow of his head. "I'm looking for Mrs. Winters." Daisy straightened her spine. "I'm Mrs. Winters," she replied, her voice steady despite her curiosity. "How can I help you, Mr. Irwin?" His eyes widened slightly and he looked around the shop. "You're the clockmaker's widow?" "I am." The familiar pain of Harold's absence tightened her chest. "Though I'm afraid I can't help you with any clock repairs. My husband's tools were sold to pay for his doctor bills." Porter Irwin ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly uncertain. "Madam, I'm not here about clocks, I'm here about your husband's other business." Daisy frowned. "I don't understand. Harold was a clockmaker, that was his only trade." "Not exactly," Porter said, lowering his voice. "Your husband and I had a correspondence going back 3 years. I'm from Denver. I supply specialty woods to craftsmen throughout the territory." Confusion furrowed Daisy's brow. Harold never mentioned he was making music boxes, Mrs. Winters. "Fine ones. He'd send for specific woods, mahogany, black walnut, cherry, and I'd deliver them. I have an order he placed just before he passed." Porter gestured toward his wagon outside. 3 months' worth of the finest woods from back east, already paid for. Daisy's knees weakened and she sank onto her workbench stool. "Music boxes. I never saw him make such things." He mentioned in his letters that it was to be a surprise, for your anniversary. Porter's expression softened with sympathy. I'm sorry to be the bearer of such news, madam. The revelation struck Daisy like a physical blow. Harold had been planning something special for her, something she would never see completed. Fresh grief washed over her. I don't know what to do with the wood, she admitted. I can't use it, and I certainly can't afford to pay you for it. It's already paid for, Porter repeated. But that's not why I'm here. Your husband also sent me detailed designs for the music boxes he planned to make. I'm a fair woodworker myself, and I thought perhaps. He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. You thought what, Mr. Irwin? I thought perhaps we could go into business together, he said, the words coming in a rush. I can make the boxes according to Harold's designs, and you could decorate them, add the feminine touches that would make them sell. Harold always wrote about your fine needlework and artistic eye. Daisy stared at him, speechless. This stranger had arrived with not only news of Harold's secret project but also a proposition that could potentially save her from destitution. Why would you do this? She asked suspiciously. You don't know me. Porter's gaze was steady. Your husband saved my life once, Mrs. Winters. I was caught in a blizzard 2 years back delivering wood to Promise Creek. Harold found me half frozen on the trail and dragged me to safety. I owe him a debt I can never repay. This seems a small way to honor that debt. Daisy studied the man before her. There was something earnest in his blue eyes, something that didn't match the hardened exterior of most men who passed through Promise Creek. I don't know the first thing about making music boxes, she admitted. But you know about making beautiful things, Porter replied, gesturing to the intricate hat on her workbench. The wood and mechanisms I can handle. What these boxes need is someone with an eye for beauty. Hope, that dangerous emotion she'd nearly abandoned, flickered in Daisy's chest. Where would we even work? My shop is barely large enough for my millinery supplies. I've rented the old blacksmith shop at the edge of town, Porter said. Smith died last winter and no one's taken it over. There's plenty of room for woodworking and whatever supplies you'll need. Daisy stood and paced the small shop, her mind racing. It was madness to consider going into business with a stranger, yet what choice did she have? The bank would take her shop soon enough. I need time to think, she said finally. Porter nodded and placed his hat back on his head. Of course. I'll be unloading the wood at the old smithy tomorrow morning. If you want to see what we might build together, come by around 9. He tipped his hat and headed for the door. Good day, Mrs. Winters. After he left, Daisy sank back onto her stool, her hands trembling. For the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. It might be foolish, but it was hope nonetheless. The next morning found Daisy standing outside the abandoned blacksmith shop, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders against the early chill. She'd barely slept, weighing Porter Irwin's proposal against her dwindling options. The large doors of the smithy were open, and she could hear the sound of hammering from within. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The space was larger than she remembered, with high ceilings and several windows that let in the morning light. Porter had already set up a workbench and was unpacking crates of wood, each piece more beautiful than the last. Rich mahogany, golden oak, deep cherry. Harold had indeed ordered the finest materials. Mrs. Winters, Porter greeted her, setting down his hammer. I hoped you'd come. I haven't agreed to anything yet, Daisy said cautiously. I'd like to see these designs my husband created. Porter nodded and reached into his vest pocket, pulling out a folded packet of papers. He handed them to Daisy, who opened them carefully, her breath caught as she recognized Harold's precise handwriting and detailed drawings. Page after page showed music boxes of varying designs, some simple and elegant, others ornate with carved details. Alongside each design were notes about the mechanisms, the tunes they would play, and suggestions for decorative elements. On the final page, Harold had written, "For my Daisy to bring music back into her life." Tears sprang to her eyes. Harold had known how much she missed the piano she'd left behind in Philadelphia when they'd moved west. This had been his gift to her, a way to bring music to their frontier life. He was very talented, Porter said quietly, respectfully averting his eyes from her tears. Daisy wiped her cheeks and straightened her shoulders. Yes, he was, and I would dishonor his memory if I didn't at least try to complete what he started. She looked directly at Porter. I accept your proposal, Mr. Irwin, but I want everything in writing, a proper business agreement. Porter's face broke into a smile that transformed his features, erasing the weathered lines and making him appear younger. Of course, I've taken the liberty of drafting something. He retrieved another paper from his saddlebag. Equal partners, we split all profits after expenses, and your husband's name remains on every box we create. Daisy read the agreement carefully. It was fair, more than fair. She felt a twinge of suspicion. This seems generous to a fault, Mr. Irwin. Are you certain you've considered the business aspects thoroughly? I'm certain I'm honoring a promise, he replied. And please call me Porter. If we're to be partners, formality will only slow us down. Very well, Porter, she said, the name feeling strange on her tongue. Then you must call me Daisy. And so began their unlikely partnership. The first weeks were awkward as they learned to work together in the confined space of the smithy. Porter was methodical and precise in his woodworking, while Daisy brought an artistic sensibility that complemented his technical skills. They started with the simplest design, a rectangular box of cherry wood with a hinged lid. Porter crafted the box and installed the mechanism, while Daisy lined the interior with blue velvet and hand-painted wildflowers on the lid. When they wound the key for the first time and Beautiful Dreamer tinkled into the quiet workshop, Daisy felt a connection to Harold so strong it nearly brought her to her knees. He would be proud, Porter said softly, watching her face. This is exactly what he envisioned. Word spread quickly in Promise Creek about the music boxes. The mayor's wife, who had commissioned a hat from Daisy, came to see their work and immediately ordered a box for her daughter's birthday. The general store owner, seeing a business opportunity, offered to display several pieces for a small commission. By the end of the first month, they had sold 6 music boxes and had orders for 8 more. Daisy closed her millinery shop. There was no time for hat making anymore, and invested her last dollars in more velvet, paint, and decorative elements for the boxes. As summer turned to fall, Daisy and Porter fell into a comfortable rhythm of work. She learned about different woods and their properties. He learned about color harmony and decorative techniques. They worked side by side, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes sharing stories of their lives before Promise Creek. Porter, she discovered, had fought briefly in the war between the states before an injury sent him home. After the war, he drifted west, working odd jobs until he found his calling in supplying specialty woods to craftsmen. He had no family left. His parents had died when he was young, and his only brother had fallen at Gettysburg. It's why I understood what Harold was trying to do, Porter explained one evening as they worked late to complete an order. When you have no one, you build something to leave behind. Something beautiful that says you were here. Daisy looked up from the delicate rose she was painting on a box lid. Is that what you're doing, building something to leave behind? Porter's hands stilled on the wood he was sanding. Maybe, or maybe I'm finally building something to stay for. His words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. As the weeks passed, Daisy became aware of a shift in how the townspeople treated her. The whispers of useless winters faded, replaced by admiration for the beautiful music boxes that were now being shipped as far as Denver and Santa Fe. Even Mrs. Peterson from the general store had grudgingly complimented her work. More significantly, Daisy noticed a change in herself. The paralyzing grief that had defined her existence after Harold's death had softened to a gentle sadness. She could now think of him with gratitude rather than pain. And increasingly, her thoughts were occupied not with the past, but with the tall, quiet man who worked beside her each day. Porter Irwin was unlike any man she'd known. He never raised his voice, never made demands, and treated her not as a fragile widow to be pitied but as a capable partner whose skills he respected. He listened when she spoke and valued her opinions on their work. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, his gaze would linger on her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. The first snow of winter came early that year, blanketing Promise Creek in white one November morning. Daisy arrived at the workshop to find Porter already there, the pot-bellied stove blazing and a pot of coffee brewing on top of it. "I was worried you might not make it through the snow," he said, helping her remove her heavy cloak. His fingers brushed against her shoulders, and even through her thick dress, she felt the warmth of his touch. "It would take more than a little snow to keep me away," she replied, moving quickly to her workbench to hide her flushed face. They worked in silence that morning, the only sounds the scrape of Porter's plane against wood and the occasional pop from the stove. Daisy was painting delicate snowflakes on a blue-stained box when Porter suddenly spoke. "The Johnsons are selling their place," he said, his voice casual. "That little house on the edge of town with the apple orchard." Daisy nodded, her brush not pausing in its work. "I heard. Mrs. Johnson wants to move back east to be with her daughter." "I'm thinking of buying it," Porter continued. "Our business is doing well, and I'm tired of renting a room above the saloon." "It's a lovely property," Daisy agreed, still focused on her painting. "The orchard alone makes it valuable," Porter cleared his throat. "It's too big for just one person, though." Daisy's brush stilled. She looked up to find Porter watching her, his blue eyes intent. "What are you saying, Porter?" He set down his tools and crossed the workshop to stand beside her workbench. "I'm saying that I've grown fond of Promise Creek, of our business." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "Of you, Daisy." Her heart began to race. "Porter, I know it's too soon," he hurried on. "I know you're still grieving Harold, but I want you to know that I care for you deeply. And I'm willing to wait, however long it takes, until you might consider a future that includes me as more than just your business partner." Daisy set down her brush carefully, her hand trembling. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now," Porter assured her. "I just wanted you to know where I stand." He hesitated, then added softly, "Harold once wrote to me that his greatest fear was leaving you alone. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd make sure you were taken care of." Surprise widened Daisy's eyes. "He asked that of you?" "A man he'd only met a few times," Porter nodded. "He was a good judge of character, your husband. He saw something in me worth trusting." His gaze held hers steadily. "I came to Promise Creek intending to honor that promise. I never expected to fall in love with you." The word love hung in the air between them, both terrifying and exhilarating. Daisy rose from her stool, needing to move to think. "This is unexpected," she managed. "I know," Porter said. "And I'm not asking for anything now, just that you might consider the possibility someday." Daisy walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered street. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: loyalty to Harold's memory, unexpected feelings for Porter, fear of opening her heart again only to lose another husband to the harsh frontier life. "I need time," she said finally, turning back to face him. "This has taken me by surprise." Porter nodded, his expression understanding. "Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere." The weeks that followed were charged with unspoken feelings. They continued to work together daily, their professional relationship unchanged, but both were acutely aware of the emotions simmering beneath the surface. Porter was true to his word. He didn't press her for an answer or behave differently toward her. If anything, he was more considerate, ensuring the workshop was warm when she arrived and often bringing her lunch from the hotel restaurant when she was too busy to leave for a meal. As Christmas approached, their orders doubled. Everyone in Promise Creek wanted a music box as a gift, it seemed, and they worked late into the evenings to meet the demand. One night, a week before Christmas, Daisy was adding the final touches to a particularly elaborate box while Porter worked on assembling mechanisms for their next batch. A blizzard had descended on Promise Creek that afternoon, and the wind howled outside the workshop windows. "It's getting worse out there," Porter noted, looking up from his work. "You should stay at the hotel tonight. It's not safe to walk home in this." Daisy glanced outside at the swirling snow. Her small room above the now empty millinery shop was only a few blocks away, but the storm was indeed fierce. "Perhaps you're right," she agreed. They worked for another hour before Porter stood and stretched his back. "That's enough for tonight. Let me walk you to the hotel." Daisy gathered her cloak and bonnet, then hesitated. "Porter, before we go, there's something I've been meaning to give you." She reached into her work bag and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. An early Christmas gift. Surprise registered on his face as he accepted the package. "You didn't have to open it," she encouraged. Porter carefully unwrapped the paper to reveal a music box unlike any they had made for sale. It was smaller, designed to fit in a pocket, and made of dark walnut with intricate inlaid stars of lighter maple wood. He opened it, and the sweet notes of "Home, Sweet Home" filled the workshop. "Daisy," he breathed, examining the fine craftsmanship. "When did you make this? It's beautiful." "I worked on it when you went to Denver last month," she explained, a shy smile playing at her lips. "I wanted you to have something that was just yours, something that reminds you of home." Porter looked up from the box, his eyes searching hers. "And where is home, Daisy?" She took a deep breath, her decision made in that moment. "Home is where you're valued, where you're needed." She stepped closer to him. "Where you're loved." The music box played its gentle tune as Porter set it carefully on the workbench. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Daisy nodded, her heart pounding. "I've had my time to think, Porter. And what I've realized is that Harold would want me to be happy. He sent you to me whether by design or fate, I don't know. But I do know that these past months working beside you have brought me more joy than I thought possible after losing him." Porter reached for her hands, holding them gently in his larger ones. "I promised him I'd take care of you, but it's become so much more than a promise to a dying man. You're not a burden or an obligation, Daisy. You're the woman I love." "And I love you," she whispered, the words finally spoken aloud. "It happened so gradually I hardly noticed until it was already done. You never once called me useless or pitied me. You saw value in me when everyone else saw only a widow with no purpose." "You were never useless," Porter said fiercely. "You're the most capable, creative woman I've ever known. You're not my obligation, you're my life's work, Daisy. Building something beautiful with you, that's all I want." The blizzard raged outside, but within the workshop, Daisy felt only warmth as Porter drew her into his embrace. His lips met hers in a gentle kiss that promised a future she had thought forever lost to her. "Marry me," he murmured against her lips. "Let me buy that house with the apple orchard. We'll expand the workshop, hire apprentices. Our music boxes will be known throughout the West." Daisy smiled up at him, joy bubbling through her veins. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." They were married on New Year's Day, 1872, in Promise Creek's small church. The entire town attended, the same people who had once whispered useless winters now cheering as Daisy became Mrs. Irwin. Even Mrs. Peterson dabbed at her eyes during the ceremony. Spring brought new beginnings. Porter and Daisy moved into the house with the apple orchard, converting the large barn into an expanded workshop. They hired 2 young apprentices from town, a boy who showed promise with woodworking and a girl with a steady hand for painting. Their music boxes became renowned throughout Colorado territory and beyond. Orders came from as far as San Francisco and New Orleans, each box stamped with Winters and Irwin, Promise Creek, in honor of both the man who had conceived the idea and the partnership that had brought it to fruition. On their first anniversary, Porter presented Daisy with a special gift, a music box larger than any they had made before. When opened, it played not 1 tune but 3, the mechanism more complex than anything they had yet attempted. "How did you manage this?" Daisy asked in wonder, listening to the beautiful melodies. "I found more of Harold's designs," Porter explained. "He had ideas I'm only now skilled enough to execute. He wrapped his arms around her expanding waistline, his hand resting on the swell of their coming child. He would be proud of what we've built together. Daisy leaned back against her husband's chest, watching the mechanism turn within the beautiful box. He brought us together, she said softly. In a way, he's still part of everything we create. As twilight fell over the apple orchard, now in full spring bloom, Porter and Daisy sat on their porch, planning new designs and dreaming of the future. The whispers of useless winters were long forgotten, replaced by respect for Mrs. Irwin, the talented artisan whose music boxes graced homes throughout the frontier. "You ever regret it?" Daisy asked, her head resting on Porter's shoulder. "Coming to Promise Creek because of a promise to a man you barely knew," Porter's arm tightened around her. "How could I regret finding you, finding us? Harold knew what he was doing when he extracted that promise from me." "He always did have good judgment," Daisy agreed with a smile. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, the sound of a music box drifted from the open window of their home, a melody of promise, of love found after loss, of a future built by four hands working together to create something lasting and beautiful. In the years that followed, the Irwin family grew alongside their business. Their son Harold Porter Irwin was born healthy and strong, followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Grace. The children grew up in the workshop, learning the family craft from their earliest days. By 1880, Winters and Irwin music boxes had become a fixture of Promise Creek, employing a dozen craftspeople and shipping their creations across the country. Porter and Daisy expanded their designs to include larger floor models, and even collaborated with a piano maker in Denver to create music cabinets that could play multiple tunes. And through it all, they remained partners in every sense, in business, in life, in love. The widow once called useless had found her purpose, and the cowboy who had promised to care for her had found his life's work in their shared creation.